The Phalanx. It is one of the oldest and most effective infantry formations ever used, and its origins trace back to ancient Greece around the 7th century BC. The idea was straightforward. Soldiers lined up in tight, overlapping rows, each man holding a long spear and a round shield called a hoplon. The shields of each soldier protected not just themselves, but the person to their left, which meant the formation only worked if everyone held their position. A single gap could unravel the entire line. Alexander the Great refined it further, extending the spears to extraordinary lengths and using the formation as the hammer, while his cavalry acted as the anvil. It dominated battlefields for centuries, not because it was complicated, but because it was disciplined. The Testudo. Roman legionaries developed this formation as a direct response to one of the oldest problems in warfare: how to advance on a fortified position without being killed by projectiles raining down from above. Soldiers on the outside of the group held their shields facing outward. Those in the middle held theirs flat above their heads. The result was a continuous shell of overlapping shields that could deflect arrows, rocks, and debris with reasonable effectiveness. The word itself is Latin for tortoise, which tells you exactly what it looked like from a distance. It was slower than other formations and required a level of cohesion that only well-trained troops could maintain under pressure. But against walls and fortified gates, it gave Roman infantry a fighting chance. The Schiltron. Scotland, in the late 13th and early 14th centuries, produced this formation out of necessity rather than choice. Scottish infantry, facing heavily armored English cavalry, needed a way to stop a mounted charge without matching it. The answer was a dense circular or oval mass of soldiers, each carrying a long spear pointed outward in every direction. From the outside, it looked like a giant hedgehog. Against cavalry, it was brutally effective. Horses would not willingly impale themselves on a wall of spear points. The problem was mobility. A Schiltron could hold ground but couldn't advance easily, and once it broke formation, it collapsed quickly. William Wallace used it at the Battle of Stirling Bridge in 1297 to devastating effect. A year later at Falkirk, English longbowmen tore the formations apart from a distance before the cavalry even needed to charge. The hammer and anvil. This wasn't a single rigid shape so much as a tactical principle that shaped battles across multiple eras and cultures. The idea was to fix an enemy in place with one force, the anvil, while a second force, usually faster and more mobile, struck from the flank or rear, the hammer. Alexander the Great used it consistently, holding the enemy's attention with his infantry phalanx, while his companion cavalry punched through a weak point and rolled up the line. Hannibal executed a version of it at the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, encircling a Roman army that significantly outnumbered his own and killing an estimated 50,000 men in a single afternoon. Military strategists still study Cannae as one of the most complete tactical victories in recorded history. The Tercio. By the 16th century, gunpowder had changed warfare enough that pure pike formations were no longer sufficient on their own. The Spanish Tercio was the answer, a combined arms block that integrated pikemen and early firearms soldiers called arquebusiers into a single tactical unit. The musketeers provided firepower. The pikemen protected the musketeers while they reloaded, which in the early days of firearms took a considerable amount of time. The Tercio was the dominant military formation in Europe for over a century and gave the Spanish Empire a battlefield advantage that underpinned much of its expansion. Its eventual decline came as firearms improved, and the reload time shortened, gradually reducing the need for dense pike protection. The hollow square. As firearms became more reliable and widespread, cavalry charges remained a persistent threat to infantry in the open field. The hollow square was the response. Infantry formed a square with soldiers facing outward on all four sides, with officers, supplies, and sometimes artillery positioned inside the protected center. No matter which direction cavalry approached from, they met a line of bayonets and concentrated fire. Napoleon's opponents used it against his own cavalry with considerable success, and British infantry deployed it repeatedly during the Napoleonic Wars. At Waterloo in 1815, British squares held against repeated French cavalry charges in conditions that might have broken a less disciplined force. The formation required exceptional morale. Standing still inside a square while cavalry circled looking for a weak point was as much a test of nerve as tactics. The Oblique Order. Frederick the Great of Prussia developed and refined this approach during the 18th century, and it represented a significant shift in how commanders thought about engaging an enemy. Rather than advancing the entire line simultaneously, the Oblique Order concentrated overwhelming force against one end of the enemy's line while the opposite wing held back or advanced slowly. The goal was to collapse one flank before the rest of the enemy could react, then roll the broken wing into the remainder of the line. It required precise timing and disciplined troops capable of advancing at different speeds while maintaining formation. Frederick used it to win several battles against numerically superior opponents, and his success with it influenced military thinking across Europe for generations. the Crescent Formation. The Ottoman Empire and various steppe cavalry forces used versions of this approach, and its principle was deception as much as force. The formation curved outward at both ends, presenting a concave center to the enemy. As the opposing force advanced and pushed the center back, the wings swept forward and around them, threatening encirclement. It was psychologically effective because what looked like a retreating center was often a deliberate invitation. The Mongols under Genghis Khan employed similar enveloping tactics across their campaigns, using the feigned retreat to draw disciplined armies out of position before surrounding them. Against enemies unfamiliar with the tactic, it worked repeatedly. Against those who recognized it, the execution became considerably harder. The flying column. This wasn't a battlefield formation in the traditional sense, but a strategic one, and its impact on modern irregular warfare was significant enough to include. A flying column is a small, independent and self-sufficient military land unit capable of rapid mobility. It was designed to cover large distances quickly and strike targets before a conventional response could be organized. The British Army used flying columns extensively during the Second Boer War in South Africa between 1899 and 1902, attempting to pin down Boer guerrilla fighters who refused to engage in set-piece battles. The concept influenced how armies thought about counterinsurgency operations, and versions of the approach appear in military doctrine well into the 20th century. Speed and self-sufficiency, not mass, were the defining features. The Banzai Charge. Japan's military culture in the Second World War produced this formation as both a tactical choice and an ideological one. When a position became untenable and ammunition ran low, Japanese soldiers were often ordered to fix bayonets and charge directly at the enemy in a mass frontal assault. The intention was partly to inflict casualties at close range and partly rooted in the belief that dying in battle was preferable to surrender. Against unprepared opponents, the charges were occasionally effective in the short term. Against dug-in American positions with superior firepower, they were almost always catastrophic for the attacking force. At the Battle of Saipan in 1944, one of the largest Banzai charges of the war resulted in over 4,000 Japanese deaths in a single engagement. It was courage in one sense, and in another sense, it was a formation designed for a style of war that firepower had already made obsolete.